It's important to be aware of the different keyframe types in After Effects, and if you open up Keyframe Types AEP from the Fine-Tuning Animation folder, you can follow along and I'll show you how to get an understanding of the different keyframe types. The first thing to understand is the difference between temporal and spatial keyframes. Down in the timeline we have our temporal keyframes, and if I double-click this layer to open it up and go to Anchor Point Path, we can see the related spatial keyframes up here in the layer panel. So these are the same things. If I click on this keyframe, notice it's selected here and it's also selected in the timeline. If I click on this one, selected here, selected here. If I click on this one, they're both selected. So these are intrinsically linked together, but they do different things. Down in the timeline, they allow you to control timing. Up here in the layer panel or in the composition panel, in terms of position, it controls position or spatial qualities. Now you can have a look up in the info panel and it will tell you what keyframe type you're working with. And you'll see that in the timeline, we're working with linear keyframes. And up here, if I select the center keyframe, it's telling me that that is a continuous Bezier keyframe. So what does that mean? Well, it means that it has a continuous angle going through the keyframe. And you'll notice as I drag my Bezier curve around, that both the incoming path and the outgoing path follow the same angle, so they're intrinsically linked together, so that as I drag one, the other one follows. Now I can break these. You'll notice that I can actually drag the handle in and out, which means I can adjust the amount of curve differently on either side. So I could have a small amount of curve on that side and a large amount of curve on that side, but the angle will always be maintained. Now I can break these handles. I can hold down Command and Alt, and that will toggle to my Convert Vertex tool temporarily, and that would be Control Alt on Windows. That allows me to break the handles, so I could have a different amount of curve on either side. I then let go of the modifiers, and I can start to create these kind of sharp edges for my curves. And this is known as, if we select that keyframe, you'll see that spatially that's a Bezier keyframe. So it's no longer continuous, it's just plain Bezier. Now there are a couple of other choices. Again, if I hold down Command Alt, Control Alt on Windows and click once on that keyframe, it now becomes a spatial linear keyframe. And if I do that to all three, you'll notice now we get straight edges between, or straight paths rather, between the keyframes. And these are linear keyframes. So we now have straight lines. Now, some people prefer to animate this way and then add the curves where they want them. And if you want to do that, you can go and change your preferences in the general settings to always default to spatial interpolation linear. Okay? I actually have that option switched on. I prefer to work that way, but I'm going to stick with the default for now because I want to show you some problems that you may encounter if you're working with the default preferences. So we'll click on OK and leave that as it is. Now, if you do decide to work that way, you can hold down the modifiers or select the Convert Vertex tool and quickly click on them to convert them back to curved keyframes. But this time, I've just clicked once, and they're now auto Bezier keyframes. And with an auto Bezier keyframe, if I select this one in the middle, notice it has two handles, but nothing joining the handle to the keyframe. And that indicates it's the same amount of curve and same angle of curve on either side. As soon as I click and drag a handle, it then changes and becomes a continuous Bezier keyframe. So that's our spatial keyframes. How does that relate to down in the timeline? Well, you'll see that even though I've been adjusting those keyframe types up here, it hasn't affected the keyframe types down in the timeline. They're still very much linear. Now, it's hard to see what's happening in terms of timing of these keyframes just by looking at their position in the timeline. So it's handy to open up this thing here, the graph editor, by clicking on this button. And that shows me the timing. It shows me that between this keyframe and this keyframe, it moves at a constant speed of 219 pixels per second. It then speeds up slightly and moves at a slightly faster speed here. Now, we don't really want that to happen. We want it to be smooth. So what we're going to do is have a look at some of the temporal keyframe types that you can apply down in the timeline. The first one we're going to have a look at are the ease keyframes, and you'll see that we have buttons down here for easy ease in, and easy ease out. Watch what happens if I select the first keyframe and easy ease out. We now have a gradual acceleration from 0 pixels per second, and it gradually gets faster as we move through the scene. And if we preview that, you can see that happening. You'll see it gradually accelerates now, which is a much more kind of gentle move, if you like, for the camera or the imagined camera to take. Now, if we're not in the graph editor view, we can also right-click on keyframes and get access to Easy Ease through the Keyframe Assistant menu. So I can say here, Easy Ease In, because I want to ease the speed going into that keyframe. And you'll notice now at the end, once we get past the middle, it will start to gradually decelerate, which again is a much smoother movement. Now, of course, we can go into the graph editor and adjust that, make it even slower just by pulling these handles out. Now, what do we do with the middle? Now, in the middle, there's a sudden change of speed, which creates a little bit of a jump there. And a lot of people would think, well, if I want to smooth it out, I'll just easy ease it, and that'll ease it on the way in and the way out. But you don't want to do that in this situation, because what happens is it will slow it down to 0 for a second. And if we preview that, you'll notice that there's a slight pause in the middle, very, very slight pause on that character. Now, you might want that to happen. If you do, that's fine. But I don't particularly want that to happen here. I want it to be a long, continuous movement. So instead of doing Easy Ease on it, I'm going to undo it, and I'm going to use this button here. This is my Auto Bezier button. And what that does is creates as smooth a transition between one speed and the other. So it's using Auto Bezier to try and smooth that out. Now, there's still a jump in timing. So if you want to use the best solution, in my opinion, to smooth out the timing here, there's one other option, and that's to rove the keyframe across time. And you can either do that by selecting it in this menu here, or if you're in keyframe view, you can right-click on it and choose Rove Across Time. And that's just going to move the keyframe in terms of its timing to smooth out the speed on either side and get a nice continuous speed as we move across this crowd of people. So that's a little bit about spatial and temporal keyframes down in the timeline, but there are a couple of other keyframe types I just want to explain to you. So what I want you to do is turn off the eyeball for the Rove Across Time layer and switch on the held layer. And if you hit the U key on the keyboard and come out to the graph editor view, you'll see that I've set some keyframes here. And basically what I want to do is I want to hold on each character. Now at the moment, I've isolated the characters. So there's one character, there's the next. I can jump between keyframes using J and K on the keyboard. Let's just close up that layer so we're only jumping between keyframes on this layer. And you'll see that I've isolated certain characters. And I really want to jump from one to the other quickly. So what I would tend to do is say, okay, I want to hold it there for about a second, or maybe a little bit more than that. So I would copy these keyframes. So Command C or Control C to copy, Command V or Control V to paste. And I paste it in there and I think, okay, now it's going to hold position between those two keyframes. But you'll notice there's a little wobble in there, okay? And that can happen. If we have a look here in the composition panel, basically what's happening is the Bezier curves are creating a little, almost like a loop. And if we just zoom in to the layer panel, so let me just select the layer panel and zoom in a little bit, we may even be able to see a little kink in the path if we go into enough detail. But you can certainly see what's happening in terms of the movement. It's kind of going backwards and then forwards. Let's just preview in this one here. And if we ram preview that, or just play spacebar preview, we can see what's happening. Okay, the anchor point is kind of doubling back on itself, and that's creating that weird movement. So if you ever want to fix that, there's a way of holding keyframes between 2 points in time. And if you ever want to create a value to be held between 2 points in time, this is how to do it. Select the keyframes you want to hold, right-click, and choose Toggle Hold Keyframe. And now we lose that little movement between there and there. So we get this nice hold on that character as he holds his hands up in the air, and then it moves to the next character. We want to hold on him, so we're going to copy our keyframes, move ahead for a little while, paste them in, toggle hold the first ones. Okay, again, we'll do a quick pan to the next character, copy the keyframes, move ahead a little bit, paste them in, and then toggle hold the first ones. You kind of get used to this, understanding what the keyframes are doing after a little bit of time using After Effects. Again, we'll copy and paste these in here. Copy, paste, toggle hold the first ones. And finally here again, copy, paste, toggle hold the first ones. Now the nice thing about this is we get a really nice effect now. So if we just switch off our preview in the layer panel and switch it on in the composition panel, take a little look at that, you'll notice what happens when it plays back in real time is we get this nice whip pan from one character to another, which creates a really nice effect. Particularly if we add motion blur. So if we add motion blur, that's going to look at the speed and the direction in which the people are moving, and it's going to blur accordingly. And I enable emotion blur for the comp up here. Now you can control the amount of motion blur in the composition settings, advanced tab, and I could bring that down to something like, in fact, let's put it up to 200. And that will give us a little bit more motion blur. Now we're also going to close the layer panel, and I'm going to make my comp panel a bit bigger and say fit up to 100%. It takes a little bit of time to update there because motion blur will slow us down, and then we're just going to preview that. Now the other thing that you could do to this, and what I'll let you do yourself, is put an ease out and an ease in on these keyframes. So as it's playing between here and here, doing the whip pan, if you ease out and ease in, you get a really nice smooth move. I'm going to do that on the finished project, and I suggest you do too. If you want to see how that's done and see the finished project, you can open up Keyframe Types End and just check the result. So let's have a look at a couple of these whip pans. Completely different result by that keyframing. So that's a little bit about the different keyframe types.